All right, everybody, I get this question all the time with the Mevo Plus and pretty much any launch monitor. How can I tell club path and club face when I don't have it measured for me? So we're gonna go really deep into this today and try to answer as much as I possibly can about that subject. Hey everybody, Scott Hogan coming at you. Before we jump into the numbers with your launch monitor, I wanted to remind you we do have our Master Your Swing Masterclass. You can sign up at the link below. It is starting today, so you can get in. Today is the last day before we keep going with it. So make sure you sign up. Love to have you working on your swing and showing you some things to do for the next month. All right, so before we get into showing you some examples, what I'm going to do is hit some live shots here and kind of break things down for you. I wanted to go over each part and let's talk a little bit about what each individual thing is controlling, what aspect of the swing and what part of the ball flight that is controlling. So the first is going to be club face angle. So club face angle, very simple. It's the angle of the club face at impact in degrees. Straight ahead would be straight towards your target line wherever you have your launch monitor set up. That's what the club face angle is, okay? So club face angle has the biggest influence on starting direction. So if the ball is starting relative to that straight ahead line, where that ball is starting, that's going to be heavily influenced by the club face. Now, it's not 100%, but it is a huge majority, so it's something that we can rely on. A couple of the other things that might throw it off, if you're not hitting the ball in the center of the face, I would work on that first. If you hit it on the toe, you might get some different reads and get some different start directions, or if you hit it on the heel, same thing. If you're hitting it on the heel, you're going to get some different start directions as well. So a reasonably well-struck shot, where the face is pointing, that is where the ball is starting out. Now, club path is going to heavily influence the spin and the curve of the golf ball, okay? So what happens in golf is we have golf shots that curve, and that curve is caused by the side spin of the golf ball, okay? That's going to be the main influence of why that golf ball is curving one way or the other. So what happens is when I swing a golf club down and I'm coming in, let's say I have the face pointed straight ahead and I swing off to one side or the other, I'm going to be sliding across that golf ball a little bit, and I'm going to be contacting the golf ball on either the outside or the inside of the ball, and that's going to start making the ball spin sideways. So for our purposes, club path is going to control the side spin of the golf ball. So now that we know what each item is controlling, we can start looking at our launch monitor and start figuring out, hey, what numbers are going to help us determine where the club path and club face is? Well, for me, I think the club face is the easiest. Now, a little disclaimer, hopefully this goes without saying, but you do need to get your unit very well set up. You have to know where your target is. Obviously, if I'm aiming off in different directions, that would have influence on these numbers, and it would not necessarily be, hey, an issue with the club face or path. It could be, but how you set up and align is going to make a big difference. So assuming we can do those things, when I look at numbers, I think it's very easy for us to look and say, hey, there is a number that works perfectly for us to figure out where the club face is pointed, and that is our launch H number or launch horizontal, and that's going to be represented in degrees. It's going to give you a degree number. It's going to say right or left, and that's going to tell you where that golf ball started relative to where the unit is lined up for its target line. So hopefully that's our target line as we're hitting balls. So I have my unit lined up. There's actually a pole straight in between these two trees out in the distance that I use to line up my unit with the golf ball. I also have the golf ball marked with a little bit of a hole here where I want to be right next to that. That's one thing you have to be careful with as well. When you're hitting with a radar unit, especially hitting off the ground, when you start making divots and you start moving around, that might have some influence on what's going on. So just keep that in mind. A lot of times I'll have people hit off of a tee so they can hit in the same spot and start working on these numbers. Just keep that in mind too. But I'm going to hit a shot here. So I've got my target, and what I'm going to look at here is my goal is when, in my swing, I'm always trying to start the ball to the right and hit a draw. So what I'm going to do is hit a shot. That ball definitely started right. Didn't really draw too much, kind of stayed straight. But you can see on our numbers, that ball was 1.8 to the right. So what that tells me is that I came in, okay, and I was able to get that face somewhat square, but it was still a little bit open, okay? So it's a simple thing. We can start checking where the face is at based on where the ball is starting. If we understand that that's what that controls, club face angle has its biggest influence on the starting direction of the ball, we have a starting direction number that's going to match up pretty well. It might not be 100% perfect. Like I said, it depends on, there are a few factors that go into the starting direction, but my experience, you're maybe off by 1 or 2/10 of a degree. You're definitely going to be close enough for our purposes of improving if you're working on this. Now, the second thing then is we have to talk about club path. So club path is determined by how that golf ball is spinning, okay? So you're looking at the spin of the golf ball, and it's how is it spinning sideways. So when I look at that, we do have a number that is going to help us, and that's going to be our spin axis number. Now, some of you might have just side RPM numbers. That also will work. Mevo Plus is giving it to us as a spin axis number, so it's kind of measuring the degree that the ball is spinning and also the direction it is spinning. Now, in all honesty, where the spin axis number is, I mean, I'll tell you what I look for when we're doing that, but the biggest thing is we want to know what that direction is and kind of just give some general ideas of like, hey, this is pretty small or pretty big, and that's going to help us out. So when I look at that last shot that I just hit, I said, hey, I hit it and I had my start direction 1.8 to the right. What I also noticed is I had a spin axis to the right, okay? So it said it was 0.8 to the right. So when I'm looking at that, what that tells me is, what would it take for a golf ball to spin to the right? Well, what that's going to be is, if I've got my club face pointed, again, 1.8 to the right, what that's going to tell me is I swung somewhere to the left side of the club face. So what I would say I did there when I'm looking at, because it is a very small curve to the right, that ball almost flew straight. What I would say is my club path on that shot was probably about 1 degree to the right. I was still cutting across the club face. The face was open to the path that I was swinging at, but it was a decent effort. It wasn't too bad. Now, let's say I make a swing here. I'm going to go ahead and try to hit some sort of a draw, something I've been working on. So again, I'm going to try to start it out to the right, swing more to the right, and let's see what we get. So I think I did it. Okay. So, not bad. What we have there is 0.4 to the right. My spin axis was 4.9 to the left. So the club face was 0.4 to the right. And so we'll call it 0.5 just for simplicity, because we're going to do a little math here. So that was good. But my club path was a little bit more to the right because we saw that ball spinning left. And in fact, that ball spun and overshot the target. So what happened is that ball started to the right and was curving left. So that's good. My club path is going to be somewhere, 1, 2 degrees out, 3 degrees out maybe. But the thing that happened was, if you look, the last thing I like to look at then for club path is I look at the lateral number. And what that is where did that ball finish, left or right of my target line? So you can see that ball finished 2.4 yards to the left of my target, okay? So what does that tell me, okay? Well, one of the formulas that we can use, if I'm gonna hit a shot that ends up on target, What's typically used, again, if you're hitting the ball very solidly, is if you hit a shot, let's say I have my path, or my club face, excuse me, out to the right. Let's say it's 0.5 to the right. Well, if I have a club path that is double the club face, that typically is going to bring the ball onto the target. So I will be very close to 0 lateral, because that ball should go out and draw, okay? Now, what will happen is, all right, what will happen is if I'm swinging too far out, so my club path was to the right, but because I overdrew the target, I started to the right, but finished really to the left by 6 or 7 feet, right? Because I'm 2.5 yards, okay? That's going to make me think that my club path, instead of being at 1 to the right, because my club face was 0.5 to the right, I was probably in that 2 to 3 to the right range, okay? Now, the big question comes, what would you fix if you're looking at that? Well, for me, club path, 2 to 3 to the right, I would really like that. I like to hit a draw. I think that would be a very good club path. So what I would actually look at is, I need to start the ball more to the right, and I'm going to use that information to feel the club face stay a little bit more open in my swing. Okay, so I'm going to try and make the exact same swing, but I'm just going to feel the club face stay more open as we go through. It was close. See, I kept the face open. I did spin it to the left, but that ball still finished 6.7 to the right. So if I'm looking at that shot, my club face was 3.1 to the right. That's actually a little bit too much. Welcome to golf. This is the never-ending game we play. I did spin it a little bit to the left, so my guess is my club path was probably somewhere around 3.5, because my ball still finished a decent amount right of the target. I did not have enough rightward swing relative to where my club face was to make the ball come back to the target. So to me, what I feel like I had was a decent path there. Again, it's probably around 3 to 3.5, okay, maybe 4 to the right, but because the face was 3.1 to the right, there we go. So that's usually how it goes. To be honest, you're probably going to keep your path pretty similar as you start to learn where you like it, and then the face is what variables. So that's where your launch horizontal gets kind of going all over. But we can start reading what's going on with that swing. So as I'm practicing here, I'm thinking, you know what? My path feels pretty good. Whatever I'm doing there, I just need to make sure I get a feel for where I need that club face to be at in my swing. So we'll talk about how we do that here in a little bit. But that is club path, club face, reading the shots. Again, the biggest thing that you can remember is the typical kind of formula that we use is a shot that's on target. You're going to have the club path and the face be in the same direction. So I'm going to have a club face that's to the left and a path that's to the left. That's going to create a fade shot, right? I'm going to start the ball left and curve it back to the right because I'm swinging left as well. And if I want to draw, I'm going to have everything to the right. And if you want the ball to be on target, if I'm hitting shots that are on target, then what you need to see is, all right, if I'm going to get my club path correct, it's going to be about double what my club face is. Okay, so again, this example, my club face was 3.1 to the right. So on target shot, as long as I hit it pretty good, is going to be about 6.2 to the right. So if I was to do that, that's probably a little bit much. Again, I'd be working on my club face there. I don't want to be swinging that far to the right, but that's something you can do. There are people that do that. So just remember that formula and what controls what, and you're able to start putting this together. Is it going to take a little bit of time? Yes. Remember, I've been doing this. I've been teaching with radar for 12 years now, and I did have radars that did tell me club path and face, and I got very good at using it. But because of that, I'm very good at doing it without it now. But you know, you can still figure out what's going on if you have some understanding of what these numbers are doing. So That's what we're looking at. All right, so let's talk just a couple of real quick about some swing mechanics that can influence these numbers, give you something to go and work on. So, you know, it's important to know what the numbers are, but then it's also important to know how you can influence them. So the first one we'll talk about is club face. So club face, the biggest thing that I have people check when they are having issues with the club face is I have them check the position of the club face at 2 spots. First one being here, that's called P2 in the golf swing. I just call it club parallel to the ground. I think that makes more sense to people. And what I want to see is, I want to see a club face. If you're somebody that has a hard time with the face being too open, you don't want the club face laying back. You want it pointing more at the ground. If you're somebody that struggles with it being too closed, make sure you're not overshutting it where it's pointing directly at the ground and this lead wrist is like wrapping underneath, because that's going to be very shut and it's going to take some work and a lot of body movement to be able to keep that from being too shut and impact. Then what I'll do is go all the way up, and then I will bring the club back down and try to get it as square as I possibly can. Okay, so I tried again to get it where it's feeling like the club is about at a 45-degree angle. What we're looking for is it to match up to my spine. And if I can do that, I usually can hit it fairly well with a decent face. That one started a little left, and if I bring it back, you can see my club face is pointing more down at the ground. So I'm going to get a left number as we go. Now what I can do is come down. I'm going to feel like the toe stays more up. I don't want to be turning it down, and I can feel that toe more up. Now I've got one that's a little bit more on target for me, and to me that would be a pretty darn good shot. You can see that ball finished 9 feet right of the target, 2.1 right was the launch, so that club path is probably somewhere around 3 to 3.5 degrees in to out. I didn't make it all the way back to the target, but it was curving left, so I had to be outside of the club face, just not all the way to that double the number. Okay? All right, so let's get to the club path then. So this one will get a lot of people. What I see a lot of times with people having a hard time with club path is, one, you just have to have a feeling of understanding how curve works on the ball. And there's one thing for me to say it and tell you what's going on. There's another thing to feel it and trust it. It can be a very big challenge to do that. So we want to make sure we're looking at this as easy as possible and getting a feel for this and seeing what's going on. So what I like to have people do is, if they're struggling, let's say, you know, they're struggling, and most people struggle with going over the top and slicing the ball. So they're getting too much rightward spin on the ball, which means the club path is too far to the left. What I have them do is work on their arm movements. So when they bring it back, I want them to go up and then let the club drop in, hitting a shot. And all we're trying to do is hit a shot at that type of speed and get some sort of leftward curve to the golf ball. Okay? Start by getting some sort of leftward curve, and what that's going to let you feel is, how am I swinging relative to my target to make that path be what it is. So, you know, again, something like that, seeing it curve left. We can get the verification from our launch monitor. That ball is definitely curving left. That ball actually finished pretty close to the target, so I probably did pretty good with club and path there. So I would work on that. If you're somebody that struggles with the opposite feel, where you're having the ball curve too far to the left, which means your path is too far to the right, what I typically like to see people do is, we need more body turn in our golf swing. There's a reason why most professionals are working on body pivot stuff, and that you always hear about them working on turning their hips or firing their hips. It's because they all fight hooks. Most good players fight hooking the ball. And so what that means you need is your body to be working through the ball so that the club path will work more around you and more to the left. And also the club face isn't going to need to turn as much, so you can keep it more open and keep it to the right of your club path. Okay, so we saw Jordan Spieth doing this a ton at the open. So what I like to have people do is you just bring it back, turn all body through, and try and just punch a shot and see what you can get with the spin axis. And there we go. I got some rightward spin on that bad boy. I started a little bit more right than I would like, but that's also not the shot I like to hit, so not my favorite. So that's what I would do to start influencing these numbers and get a feel. Get a feel for what you can do with each of them, and you're going to be able to put it together and be able to take it to the golf course, which is going to help you shoot lower scores. All right, so that is club path, club face by the numbers. Again, very, very tricky at first, but with a little bit of practice, what I recommend people do is get out there, get with your launch monitor, and just start guessing. What do you think it did? As you start doing it, you're gonna start seeing, hey, this makes sense, this is what's going on. That's gonna make you have a better understanding of what is going on, but it's also gonna make you have a better understanding of how to hit shots on the golf course. Ultimately, when we go play, the reason I like to work on this is because we do need to get a feeling for how the golf ball is flying, because you know what, sometimes we got to avoid trouble, or you know, whatever reason, we're gonna have to make sure we have control of the ball. So this is what we can do, and that's really gonna help us out in the long run. So if you have questions about it, this is so important, please leave those comments down below. Thanks again for watching. Click the subscribe button if you're not a subscriber already, and we will see you in the next video. This is By the Numbers.